So let's go back to Nashville, where we
That's
met.
where we met.
I know. It was so
always
good.
say you had me at hello with that smile. You walked. I did not want to like you. We had a mutual friend. She loved you, and I was like, oh, I'm going to lose my friend because she loves this girl, Andrea. And then you walked in with that smile, and I was like, okay, well, I'm done for because
You're so
I got to
funny.
be friends with her now too.
You're so funny. You're married. You still are, but you're married, but you had no children then.
No, I know. My husband and I were together for a long time before we actually even lived together. So yeah, we dated long distance for almost 5 years, and Nashville was the city we didn't even when we were married, we were living apart. So Nashville was the first city that we came together. And you know, my husband, Steve, he is a big Andrea fan. And that's saying a lot because he's very quiet and he does not make it known who he likes, but he makes it known that he likes you.
I love him. I love Steve with everything. How do you characterize Nashville? Because for me, like, I think about Nashville a lot, especially like in the business when I was just like, what is happening here? Nashville was like this beacon, and I was just so grateful to have that time.
Yeah, I mean, Nashville was definitely, it was a time in our lives before things got complicated. At least that's how I felt. Now I've got kids and, as pre-kids, things were fun still, some of us were married, some of us not, but we were still at this age where we were having fun. We could still do life. Although I think back at that time and I was like, why was I always so tired? Because
you worked the morning shift. That's why.
I did work that morning shift. But I'm like, gosh, that was such a special time in our lives. The friendships that we built there. I mean, it's just amazing. Like, I could go years without talking to some people from Nashville, but we get together and it's like we are back in that place. Just during that time where it was just so special.
So special. Where were you before? Like, what was your trajectory? Like, what stop was that?
That was my third stop. So I was in a small town in Oregon, and I made great friendships there. And I know you did too. I mean, that's where you met. The mutual friend we were talking about, Heather. Hey, Heather.
Hey, Heather.
And so, yeah, I was in Medford, Oregon, and then I was in Lexington, Kentucky. And both of those cities those were also wonderful times. I mean, when you're working in local news, really all you do is have each other. When you're working all the time, you don't get paid a ton of money. I mean, your wardrobe says otherwise, but you're not making a ton of money. And, those friends that you have in those small markets, I mean, that's like your livelihood, right? I mean, those are your people. So you better like them. And luckily I did. It's hard when you don't in a small news station. But yeah, I mean, luckily I was really fortunate when I came to Nashville. I had already built, some friendships, but there was something very special about Nashville for sure. I think it just in our newsroom environment, we had really great leaders who, I felt like promoted a healthy work environment. Not always the case in local news.
At all.
No.
Which we both learned
yes.
the hard way.
We learned. Yeah. But not there though. We saw really a very nurturing environment. And it was one of those stops like you could stay there forever if you wanted to. Right. So it was, in your career, it's like there's the stop where you're like, okay, I'm ready for my next move. But Nashville was definitely where you would be able to hang out a little bit longer or make your life there, which we had lots of friends who stayed and built their life there.
Yeah. Why did you get into news in the first place?
Yeah, news. I love sharing information. And you know this, you ask me like, how do you do this? And it's just like, I love to share what I know. And I think that was always something I did as a kid. I was doing the school announcements over the PA system since I was little. And so like sharing information, I always felt like was empowering. Like that's how you empower people is to share what you know. And that's how you help people. And that's how you help your community. And so, I thought this was really a mission driven career for me. Like I always thought like journalism is how I was going to help the world and get paid to do it. I'm like, how cool is that you get to do that? I mean, Even as a kid, so I was a tomboy growing up. I had a lot of guy friends, so I think I mean I grew up playing with like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and
Right.
I wanted to be April O'Neil, and she's the reporter who gets to report on the turtles. I was like, what a cool job! Like to be on the front lines of what the turtles are doing to save the world. Like I thought that was cool. I also didn't know it was a realistic job. I thought it was
Mhm.
like kind of like acting where you'd have to, I don't know, I didn't know what it entailed. But then, we had a great journalism program at the University of Texas where I went. And so that kind of dream became a reality. Like, oh, I can make a career of this? Like sharing information with people? What?
I
So
know.
yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And, my dream was to be a correspondent. Like I thought, like if I could be on the front lines of every big story, that there would be an opportunity to share with a larger audience, bigger platform, and make a bigger difference. I mean, that's kind of how I saw the trajectory of my career, and that's what my dream was.
Yeah. And I
Didn't
mean
get
that
there, but
right, which we'll talk about, right? Because I think that's what a lot of us come in to do, and that's what we pick up our lives. It's just very rare and unique. Once we're in it, we just kind of do it because that's what we do. But if you really think about it and talk to other people about how they go about navigate their career, they're not picking up their whole life and starting over and over and over and over again. I remember when I was in Charlotte, like I had just moved there and I was trying to find the grocery store and I couldn't quite find it and having like a meltdown in my car because I just wanted, like, I was just so like, I'm new here. I don't know where anything is. I don't know who anybody is. Like, I don't have anyone to call to ask. I just have to figure it out. But it's again chasing this mission and goal, the same that you
mm-hmm.
had of just like really wanting to serve and having it be rooted in service. But I think people often think because we're on TV that it was just about being on TV. And for some people
Yeah.
it is. We're not gonna
Yes.
sugarcoat.
Well, yeah, for sure. But we've got to make it clear to people that it's not a glamorous career, right? It was
At
not
all.
glamorous ever.
At all.
I think it's getting more and more evident that that's the case as we see the reporters outside in the torrential rains, and people are starting to realize like it's not a glamorous job by any means, and it's not a glamorous lifestyle. I mean, to be traveling that much, and you're not traveling to like the Bahamas. You're going to like really devastated
Yeah.
situations, and it's just it's not glamorous by any means. And I think, yes, you're right, there are those who are chasing the idea of being seen, but I'm also seeing as the business changes, you're filtering that out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I think the people who end up lasting are the ones who are more mission driven, because if you're just on it to be on TV, like woo, there are other ways to be
I
seen.
tell college students all the time, like, let me just be clear, you have the internet now. Like, you just do something else. Like, it's much easier. There's a lot of other easier ways to be seen than choosing something like this. This is
Yeah.
not, don't do this if that is your only motivation. But Seattle, let's get there because that's where everything changed. That was
Yes.
like, that was really just such a, I don't know, it was just such a transformative place for you. Kind of how do you, looking back, describe your time there in local news?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I had come from what we talked about, a nurturing, just a really kind environment, and I came to a city that felt a little isolated. I mean, when you're living in the Pacific Northwest, you're kind of far from everything, first of all. So it was hard. I had family in Texas. A lot of my friends are now back in the South or East Coast. My husband's family is on the East Coast. So I'm like in the tip of the West Coast, like, Northwest. So it was, I think, isolating physically, but I also walked into a work environment that was just different from what I was used to. Certainly the people there have had, they had so many years of experience, and I was learning a ton. I was learning a ton from my colleagues, but I would say it was a transition time for the company, as it is with local news these days. You know, the company had gone through a sale, and it makes things hard, I think, on management as they're trying to transition to kind of a new boss, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so how does that trickle down? And I felt like I got, you know, I felt some of that pressure, and, you know, it was not the, you know, the healthy, fun environment that I had just come from. You know, I'm like, I left this beautiful place to walk into, you know, a challenging time in my life. And Seattle was so rainy that year. I just remember, I'm like, oh my gosh, this weather is wild. I'm in the middle of what felt like nowhere, and I wasn't necessarily feeling like the environment that I walked to at work. And that's all you have, right? When you move for your job, at first, that is all you have. I did not have friends, or I didn't have a ton of friends. I did have one friend who really worked to try to get me involved. And I did make friends within, you know, the station that I worked at. But when you're not feeling like you're compatible with maybe your leadership or management, and the morale there was just some things going on, and it was tough when that's what you're dealing with for the majority of your day. Is, you know, this feeling of uncertainty in the workplace because of this like sale hanging over you, pressure from management. It was a very stressful time and very lonely time. I wasn't going to church, you know, I go to church regularly. I had not found a church. I didn't even really want to, you know. So it was a tough time. It was a dark time in my life.
No, yeah. I know. I remember your first day was that plane crash.
Yes.
And you were like on TV for like hours.
For hours. My first day, you do your paperwork. And your second day in local news is usually you get to shadow somebody. So here I was, you know, since you're shadowing, you're not going to be doing as much. So you think. So I was wearing like my new boots that had a big old chunky heel on them. I was wearing a dress. I recall this because I'm like, getting ready, thinking like, it's going to be, you know, for a news day, it's going to be a mildly easy day. And then there was a helicopter crash. And it was one of our, you know, competing stations, and 2 people had died. And it happened right next to the Space Needle, which is like an iconic, you know, landmark in Seattle. And I didn't know how I was going to be utilized. I'm like, okay, I can help with anything. I'll do whatever what you need me to do. And, you know, the news director at the time was like, you're going to do all the live shots for all of the NBC affiliates. And I was like, I say what? I'm going to do what? So I was in a sense, a correspondent that day. So I think it was like 27 live shots. So, you know, normally in a day you do 3 or 4 live shots. That's on like a very busy, you know, news day. So the fact that I did 27, I mean, it was a long day. And you know, I was getting questions from anchors asking me like, is it normally busy that time of day in Seattle? And I'm like, I don't know. I've lived here for a week. I don't actually know. But, you know, you're like, yes, I'm told that it is very busy. I mean, it was during rush hour, you know, so it was a busy time of day. You know, I'm getting information that I can. And my colleagues were so kind. I mean, they were busy turning stories for the local channels. And I was getting as much information that I could to get the information out to, you know, stations across the country. And like, I even did, you know, live hits for Canada. And I'm like, this is wild. My life is wild. So I would say, you know, when I started in Seattle, that's how it started. It was a helicopter crash. My first like full reporting day, there was a devastating mudslide, you know, a landslide that killed 43 people. Andre, I mean, can you believe? And I was one of the first reporters on the scene. I mean, this was before CNN had even gotten there. I had already been there for 2 days. And then I saw, you know, all the network correspondence coming out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like you know, you understand kind of the situation that you've been kind of embedded in. And so it was a very wild start to my, career in Seattle. It was wild. But when dust started to settle and, I got back into my routine, it became a very isolating situation. The situation was very unique in that I was reporting in a different city and kind of away from like the main station. And so, but when I look back, I don't regret that time. I think I learned a lot. I grew a lot. I mean, it was hard when I was in it, and I didn't stay very long, which, it's the shortest place I ever worked, which, me, like, I'm about setting goals and I like longevity. And so it was hard for me to walk away from that position, but I had to do what was best for my health, mental health. And let me tell you, once I got my second job, it was in Seattle. I got to go to another station, and it was a better fit for me. I got pregnant right away. Can you believe that?
That's what I was going to say. That's when I noticed the difference in you in terms of like your feelings about the business is when you got pregnant.
Yes. I mean, I think that that first job in Seattle showed me that I could be indispensable, like that I am dispensable, like, right. That you can work hard and you can do everything that you are supposed to do, but some people just might not like you. It does not matter how much you work. It does not matter that you put in everything that you have, that it is a very subjective business, right? So that was because I had never experienced that before.
I know.
I had been in environments, right, where you work hard, you do your best, and it is recognized. And it was the first place that I had gone where I realized that's not enough. It still wasn't enough. And I'm like, and if that's not enough, and I've made this career like my mission and my purpose, my world kind of crumbled. I mean, you saw it live, just kind of crumble. Like my identity was so rooted in this career and mission, and the fact that I was unhappy made me question everything about where am I? What do I do? So but I did not want to leave my career on that note. So I said, maybe it's just not the right fit in this place. So I did give it another go. I said, okay, well, maybe I'll go to another station and see if I still feel that way. And I did. I went to a competing station in the market, and it was a wonderfully loving environment, at least for me. And I went to, a place where management was super supportive, extended confidence in me. And so, but the fact that like, I think that it still, for me, was like, it wasn't enough maybe. Like I needed still, I think, something more. And I guess even in that unhappy time, I'm appreciative that it planted the seed that this isn't the end all be all career, right?
But Janet, it's hard to get to that point though, because you were like, I'm going to be in Washington. I'm going to be a Washington correspondent,
Yes.
And so what do you like? So how does that feel in your body when you're just kind of like, because that's what we always do, right? When something kind of doesn't work in one place, then we just wait for our contract to be up or leave before our contract is up if we can, right? And just go someplace else because that mission still supersedes the current situation.
Right.
But what happens when you're like, I'm not going to go to another station?
Yeah. So I had a great experience in that second station in Seattle. And I was at a crossroads. I'm like, I can stay here and continue doing this job. Or maybe it's time to, because I wasn't unhappy by any means. I actually, when I told my boss that I was leaving, I cried in her office because I'm like, it's not that I want to leave here or leave this career, but I knew that I wanted something more. And it wasn't necessarily just in my career, but it was in my life, right? I had a child. So I mentioned that I had gotten pregnant. And so I had a 1.5-year-old when I was at the crossroads. Like, my contract was coming up. I could either resign, stay another year in Seattle, which I had actually come to love. I realized, okay, I didn't like Seattle because I didn't like my job at the time. But when I actually loved my job and appreciated Seattle, I'm like, I can actually like the rain. And I went out and started enjoying the mountains and enjoying my life. And so I'm like, well, I do like this city. And then, but I had to think, what's next in my life? Not just my career. Like, what do I want to get out of life? And my 1-year-old, it hit me when he did not want me to read him bedtime stories, because that's Dad's job. Because I was a nightside reporter and I was never home at night except on the weekends. So on the weekends, I wanted to read him his bedtime story, and he did not want me to do that. And that was devastating. I'm thinking, is that what I want my life to look like? Was the mission that I had, does that supersede my mission now to be a mother and to be growing this little human? And, I had to really sort that out in my mind. So, I had an agent who had interviews lined up for me in other cities, bigger cities, and possibly I could have eventually gone to that correspondent job. Who knows, right? But I really had to look at where I was in my life and decide, like, who am I going to choose? What am I going to choose? And if I choose wrong, like, let's say I left the business, which is what I ended up doing, and I didn't like it, I saw that people were coming back, right?
Right.
I always go back.
Right.
But if I didn't take this chance, I would never know what is out there. And local news, you kind of are in this little bubble of like what life is like.
Look, the bubble, and I don't know if it's like, I don't know if anybody's ever said it outwardly or not, but there is a bit of elitism about, you made it to this point, and if you leave, what does that mean?
Yeah.
The dark, we call PR the dark side, for God's sakes.
Because you feel like you are a fighter of justice, right? And so you feel like you're selling out a little bit. At least that's what they tell you when you're in it. But once you leave, you realize you're not selling out. You're learning something new. And I think with local news, that's the other thing, was that it got to a point for me where I was like, okay, I'm in a different city. I'm telling different stories, but you're really still doing the same skill. And I'm like, am I learning a new skill?
Mm-hmm.
And I am a lifetime learner. And I'm also like, I can't just learn one thing. I got 3 majors in college because I'm crazy ambitious. I say it's because I was indecisive. I'm like, I like it all, so I'll just do it.
No, Janet, you are also crazy and ambitious. Not just crazy ambitious, you're crazy and ambitious. You do the most in everything. Like, if you say you're going to do it, you're going to do the most.
No. I felt like I needed to learn more. I wanted to expand my brain. So I wanted to see what else was out there. Like,
but where do you start? Where do you start, though? Did you have a job when you left?
When I left the business?
Yeah.
Yes,
you had a job lined up.
I did have a job lined up.
Uh-huh.
I had like a fork in the road. It was like a true fork in the road. I could have either gone for another TV job in a bigger market than Seattle, like They
I
were
don't think I
flying
knew
me
that.
out.
I
Oh
don't think
yeah,
I knew that.
did I not tell you? Yes, I was getting ready to fly out to see the news director there, and then I had been interviewing, and I had gotten an actual offer from the state's largest utility, and I was going to build up their media relations department. They had been without a person for a while, and so they're like, let's see what we can do. And so I went from one person to, I think when I left that job a year ago, I had a team of 5 people. So it was really an achievement to have grown that department. So I did have a job lined up. Yes, I did.
What were the conversations you had with Steve when you're just thinking about, like, I might not want to do this anymore in terms of local news?
Yeah, is it Steve or is it my mother who I had to have a really tough conversation with? Andrea knows. I mean, this is as much my identity as it is my family's identity, right?
Yeah.
There's so much pride and, like you said, elitism to some extent. Like, wow, like this is a cool job. You have a cool job. And I had to have a tough conversation with them too. But
was it cultural, would you say?
Like my family, how they were going to handle it?
Well, yeah, just in terms of their thoughts of like what you were doing with your life. Do you think that like culture had something to do with it?
The Korean American culture is you work hard, you go hard, and this idea of like, whatever you're going to do, you better try your best at it, right? And so I think to my family, it felt like, are you sure? Like, you've worked so hard. Are you going to take a step back by leaving? But I also think that they realized working until midnight and being out on the front, I mean, there were so many riots and protests and kind of some dangerous stories that were happening in Seattle at that time where, I had a colleague who got his hand shattered from the grenade, a grenade that had gone off, like one of those police grenade things. And so it was a hard time to be reporting in Seattle too. And I think they realized, like, let's give it a try. It's disappointing because I think they envisioned as well, like this Washington correspondent, right? So it was their dreams as much as it was mine. And so, yes, it was hard and it was a tough conversation. I think Steve was definitely more supportive in the sense that he knew it was hard on our family, what we were doing. It was hard. I mean, he was basically a single dad at night. He'd get our son from, the nanny at the time, and then he was doing it all, and I didn't get home until midnight, and I would do a nighttime nursing situation, and essentially I was up by 6 a.m. and we just had to do it all over again, where I was then doing the mommy thing in the morning. So it was a tough life, and I think he understood that.
Yeah.
Time to try, at least.
Right.
Let's see what's out there, right?
Right.
But it's scary. It's terrifying.
Yeah, he's so great because he's really kind of been down for all of it, like the whole roller coaster.
He has moved. I mean, the fact that when I was living in Lexington and he was still in DC, I mean, we were doing this long distance relationship. I was living in a house full of, it felt like a sorority house, and I was married. Married while living in a sorority house. That's what it felt like, So he let me really pursue my dreams. And I mean, to this day, like, he is the key to how we can make things work in our house. Like, we both work, but he is so supportive and hands-on with the kids. And I just don't think that, I could do all of these dreams that I have could be fulfilled without his support, and my mom, who is here, my dad.
Yeah,
lets
he
her be
definitely
here.
Steve might not smile about it, but he'll go along. He might
Yes.
not smile though, but
Yes.
he'll go along.
Well, we talk about this. The first conversation, like we had a serious conversation before we started dating, and I was like, my career is going to come first. Are you good with that? Because if you're not good with that, then like we're going to have to maybe like not see each other, because there will be days where but luckily he is a very independent human being and he was not a needy person. And so, I mean, he'd let me do whatever. I mean, I was living in Oregon while he lived in DC still. So, I mean, we've been through it all.
Absolutely. And then with your parents, like for me, with my parents, and that's like one of the unique things that we always bond over is our first generation identities. And that they never had an opportunity like this, right? So it was kind of like, and the idea of like, oh, work is not fulfilling, and so I'm gonna just like think of something else to do, comes from such a place of privilege, right? Where they are like, you get paid, it's a good job, they're not
Yeah.
killing you, so go to work.
Yeah.
What is this? What is this?
Try something new.
Try something new and let's throw it against the wall and see what will stick. It's like, no, they pay you. This is the role. Like, work is not supposed to make you feel fulfilled. Work is not supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
It's work. It's a means to providing for yourself.
Right.
So,
and I think that's cultural and generational, right? That mentality that you stay where you are and you really become a specialized person, and that's where you bring value, is through longevity and specialization. And I think we're seeing, not just in the news business, but across the board, why that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
You want breath.
I know. You've come so far, Jan. So then, okay. So now you're in your full PR role. Another thing that's like, for me, that's difficult is, well, not difficult, but I really had to do, and I had to do for a long time before I actually left, was identifying my skills. Like, I just didn't know what would translate, how to even talk about it to somebody who's not in news, because news is such a niche and it's such a special club almost, that people outside, they watch the news and they think that they actually know how it works, but they, people always be like, oh, you write? I was like, yes, I don't just put a makeup on and go on television. Like, some people have that luxury, but like not in local news. Like,
yeah.
I mean, like, no, yes, I write. I have to coordinate people. I have to do all, you know what I mean? Like,
yes, you're a scheduler, you're a data miner, essentially. I mean, you're mining for stories, right? Which no one,
How did you translate that? Because that's what you've done for me. Where I send you all my stuff. Jan's the person. I send all my things. And I'm like, does this make sense? Can you translate all of this for me?
Well, luckily I left news and went to a very healthy environment, which they provided a lot of grace, like as I was figuring things out. But what I realized is communicating is communicating, and communicating to an audience, like that's what you do in news. That's what you do in all professions. Like, who is your audience and what are you trying to say to them? And so whether that's a big audience or whether it's somebody in a meeting, like what is the message you're trying to get across? And I found that was so foundational. And as long as you can really ground yourself on that foundation, that no matter who you're communicating to, like you gotta think about communications basics. Like, how do you communicate to somebody, right? And then I think the tactical skills, like writing and translating the fact that when you're, because first of all, I don't think people really knew what a typical day was, which I know that a long time ago I think you shared a blog or something with like what a typical news day is. And I think people's minds were like totally blown. Like, what? You're actually like talking to sources to try to find a story. And so what I found was people don't know that. So do not assume that people know that when you're trying to sell yourself, that, oh, they know that you're doing X, Y, and Z, and that 4 live shots, like, they have no concept of what a live shot is. So you really have to break it down to them. Like, you know, I have 4 deadlines every day. And people are like, what? Most people don't even have one deadline.
I know.
Deadlines are like 1 a week or something, right? Or 1 a month. So like the fact that you have 4 separate deadlines a day, like, whoa, that they can understand. Not a live shot, but like a deadline. And the fact that you have to schedule interviews, and, you know, they can understand what scheduling interview looks like. They don't really get like mining for stories maybe, but you're like, you have to pitch a story idea. They'll get that because they have to pitch ideas all the time. So I think just understanding, like, you know, because I remember, like, I would get people's resumes, people who are trying to get out of the business, and they would, you know, show me the resume, and it would be like live in the 4, 5, and 6 o'clock show. And I'm like, that means nothing to people outside of news. And fill in anchor does not mean, I mean, great. If you're trying to get an anchor job, that's great. But if you're not, nobody cares that you filled in anchored. What does that mean?
Right.
You just really have to translate extra you cannot assume people know what things look like in a newsroom. Sure, there are lots of great shows. Like, there are a lot of great shows. The morning show, right?
The morning show,
yeah,
right?
It's a great show. Yeah, people still do not know what that means. Like,
right.
What does it mean to be a news reporter or an anchor, right?
Oh my goodness. Okay, we're winding down now, and I definitely do want to touch on a few things before we have like our final thing, our kind of final thoughts. What do you know now? Now we have to say, little Bennett is here. So you have 2 children, sweet little Bennett, sweet little Zachary. So you're a mother of 2 now. What do you know now? And you've got a new job.
Yes.
With a very big tech company,
Yes.
A very large, major, mega tech company. What do you know now that you didn't know kind of when you were like sitting there and there was discontent as a nightside reporter?
That the world is so much bigger than you ever even knew. And I think as a reporter, you assume that you see it all. But when you actually leave that world of news, it's actually a really small business, and you see that there is life outside of that world, it is huge. Like you said, I mean, your ceiling is just so much higher. Like, being a correspondent is awesome. Like, you get to go to, you know, cool cities, maybe doing really important stories. I'm not going to take away from that. But what you realize is your ceiling is higher than getting a better schedule and living in a cooler city. Your ceiling could be like leading some major initiatives and really making an impact, especially like in tech. I just did not even realize they are ingrained in everything that you do. Like, not just, you know, like the platform that you're using on here, like how people live their lives. And I think when I went into the utility, I saw that too. Like, I mean, I'm working for energy. Everyone uses energy. Mm-hmm. Not everyone might watch news, but everybody uses energy. And it is so important. And so I realized, wow, the world is so big and your impact is not so limiting. It's just, you can do so much and your ceiling can be so much higher than you could have ever imagined. It's, I mean, like, what are positions for a reporter? Reporter, senior reporter?
Investigative reporter?
Yes. Then what? You can be
really?
CEO. I mean, really, like, you get out of news and you can be CEO. Whoa. Like a chief executive officer. Why? Wow. Like, I don't even think I even dreamt of that. Like, that could be a possibility, right? Mm-hmm. And you, chief creative officer, I mean, you are a shining example of that you can do anything. There's so much more world out there.
Well, I don't know if I'm the example just yet. I'm working on the example part.
You
But
are
one
my
thing that you
hero.
did, one of the things you told me that literally I thought about over and over, and I still think about today, especially when I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But like as you know the whole story. Um, you told me once, you were like, Andrea, you don't have to strive to be Oprah. You can strive to be the people that Oprah interviews. And I was like, you know what? I never thought about it.
That's right.
It was so major. It was so major in terms of thinking outside the box. And the last question is, what did you do with that dream of wanting to be a correspondent? Like, how do you put that to bed so you can kind of create new ones, especially since that was your driving force for so many years? Was there grief associated with having to let that go?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of my colleagues who've made it, who've done it now, who are now national correspondents, and I'll see them on, and I'll cheer them on. Like, they made it. They're there. They're covering the big stories. And I mean, I don't think that it's like, could I have? I really have been able to take my current job and really make it about my core mission, which was, how do I empower people with information? And that was the true goal, whether it's as a correspondent or now in PR, where, I'm working on, things that really are important to me, like energy and sustainability, which I think is so important to the world. Like, I was able to take that and use that in my job. That I am still empowering people through communications by informing them, so that my mission really hasn't changed. I am doing what I had set out to do. I think what changed is the platform in which I'm doing it.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a segment called Act Up. See what I did there? ACT.
I love it.
There we are.
Okay, you need to do some marketing for me on my life.
No, we're gonna see. We gotta see how this lands. We still don't know how this is gonna land, but whatever. So if somebody, I just want to make sure that people, and you've obviously been amazing, just have tangible, like a tangible roadmap, right? About if they're in a space and they have that feeling. Sometimes it's even hard to articulate. They have that feeling that they know, like, man, they're wondering about what's next, but they've experienced this thing for so long. Like, what are like the 3 things you'd say they need to do to be able to chart this next course for them, or even to give them the courage to even think outside of the box?
Wow, that is deep. I would say, number 1, and just because I'm a writer and a communications person, like, sit down and write, whether it's through your resume or through a LinkedIn profile, or just write, who are you? Like, what is it? What is your purpose? What do you want to be? Who do you want people to see you as, right? Like, write that down, because I think that will be a guiding light to what you do next, right? Like, because I don't think that a resume always is linear. Like, if you can really, even if you look at it, and for me, that's what I did, was I looked at my resume and I said, how does my resume tell my story? What is your story? I mean, that's essentially number 1, whether it's through your resume, LinkedIn profile, or just writing your story. Because I think that is really important in figuring out, maybe you don't know what's next, but at least you know who you are today, like, and how you want to be seen. So I would say that that's number 1, and that I think that will help. And I'm a big believer in killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So I feel like that's a very productive thing to do too. Let's be productive while we're being soul searching.
Jan is productive. If you're going to be anything, Janet, you're going to be productive. Look.
Yes, let's turn your soul searching into a productive activity, right? So I would say that. And then I would say number 2, like, talk to people, like people who have left, people you admire, somebody you want their life, their job, like talk to them about how they got there. And I think it will invoke inspiration. Like just talking to people. I know, and it's hard in this world, right? We don't have the pandemic all the way behind us. It's hard to get out and meet people, but I really felt like letting people know that you're even thinking, they will start to think of you for different opportunities. I mean, I know that there are people who've been reaching out to me, and then I'll see something that made me think of them. But if you're not putting yourself out there, like, people aren't going to know that you're even looking, that you're unhappy, that you want something new. So, use those resources and the networks. And then 3, just because I'm a nerd, but I really find, like, do some learning. Like, what if you know that you want to do X? Why don't you learn about it? Because sometimes I find that people are like, I want to do that, but they really have done nothing to learn about that. What it takes to do, like, if you want to do PR and you have never done PR before, read a PR book or go attend a PR class. Like, it's not just going to happen, I think, is where there's a bit of, disconnect. Like, you do have to, learn,
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of reading. Andrea knows I'm a big reader.
Oh my
so,
God. 2 kids, a whole full-time job, a whole husband, a whole daughter, and then she reads like 500 books a year. It irritates me, actually.
We're going to get Andrea reading more.
I need to. I was like, how do you find the time? It's crazy. So I love to exercise and I love to read. I love my children. So I try to, how do I do that all in one? So I will walk with my child in a stroller while listening to a book. I'm getting exercise, listening to a book, and spending time with my child. Woo! Whoa.
That's how you do it.
So how can people follow you?
Yes. So I'm doing a lot of different things, as Andrea knows. But my LinkedIn, if you're looking for a business chat, Janet Kim, I think it's like Janet Kim 425, find me. And I have an Instagram page, an Instagram handle that I'm really featuring a lot of things that I do with my family and how you balance work and family life. And if that's something you're interested in, my handle is @JanetKimTV. So that's a continuation of my TV life, but it still works. So I kept it.
It's my favorite. I was just like, I wish I lived there. When I come visit, we've got to go do some of the things so I can be with Zachary and give thumbs up on all, like, they literally go everywhere. I don't know how you even have the energy. So the whole family goes on these adventures through Seattle and beyond. And she showcases like different things you can do with your children, and they have a blast.
I find it sometimes easier than just staying home. So it really is a self-serving mission too. But like I said, I love helping other people. And if my adventures can inspire or help someone else with theirs, that's what I'm aiming for. So, but you heard it here. Andrea's coming to visit. Let's see when we can hold her accountable to that.
I'm coming. I'll be taking plenty of pictures.
Yes, I hope so.
All right. I love you, my friend.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This
you.
was like so fun. This was just
so
like what
fun.
we talk about anyway,
yeah,
right?
This is exactly. It's our normal conversation.